Hi guys. So, just now we were talking about you have been assigned to groups, and so there are supposed to be 3 people in each group. So it's gonna be nice that we're gonna be serving the elderly, in this semester, and then you guys will be, taking care of one elderly for each student. Okay, so and then you guys we will be visiting the elderly center, and next week some guest speaker will also come to speak about the elderly center. So, and today we shall be talking about the efforts, because this course is hosted by both the Chinese medicine school and my department. I'm Carrie Wu. I will introduce myself again because some of you just joined, and I'm from the religious and philosophy department. I'm Carrie Wu Ho Yi. So actually, from my background, I am a teacher who teach counseling. Yes, and also I am a Christian, and also I teach Christianity also. So I like to actually the design of this course, if you look at the course outline again, because some of you might not have attended the first class whenever we introduce the course. So the structure of this course is about introducing because there's a lot of the charity work and the care service, the medical service in Hong Kong is actually originated from Christian beliefs, So maybe I will show you a video first, so you will know a bit more of the background. Show you this one. I show you this video first, and then let's continue.
What good is Christianity? Have the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth made the world a better place? Or is Christianity positively harmful, a menace to civilization, a threat to human survival, and the principal enemy of moral progress in the world? What does the historical record tell us? The world that Jesus was born into considered women socially and intellectually inferior. They were not permitted the same rights, privileges, and freedoms that men enjoyed. And in Jewish culture, women were not permitted to speak in public, especially in the presence of a man, which also meant she couldn't testify in a court of law. But the way Jesus treated women was revolutionary. Not only did he stand against the anti-female culture of his day, he also set a new standard of kindness, compassion, and respect. As a result, the early church included women, honored women, supported widows, and gave women a freedom and dignity previously unknown in any culture. In India, where widows were burned on their husbands' funeral pyres, it was the Christians who were largely responsible for getting this practice banned. In China, young girls were intentionally crippled by binding their feet. Again, it was the influence of the Christians that led the Chinese government to outlaw this practice. It's no exaggeration to say the birth of Jesus was the turning point in the history of woman. In the ancient Greek and Roman world, children were property. Babies, especially little girls, were often killed immediately after birth or abandoned to die of exposure. And what we call child abuse today was considered normal back then. Then Jesus appeared, and children became people. Christians opposed all forms of child abuse, rescued babies who had been left out to die, often adopting them into their own families. They taught the world to value and care for the youngest members of society. Christians were the first people in history to systematically fight against slavery. Slavery in the West was abolished largely because of the efforts of Christians like William Wilberforce in England and the abolitionists in America, most of whom were Christian ministers. These followers of Jesus reasoned that since we are all created equal in the eyes of God, no one has the right to rule another without their consent. Christianity provides the moral foundation not only of anti-slavery, but also of democracy. The freedom and opportunity enjoyed in the U.S. and other democracies is built on ideas furnished by the Judeo-Christian worldview. The belief in free will opposes tyranny and leads to a representative government. The understanding that man is sinful underscores the need for checks and balances and three branches of government. The idea of being governed by the rule of law rather than the authority of man flows from the Ten Commandments. Other Christian concepts like the dignity of labor, the existence of moral absolutes, fair trials with witnesses, and the importance of civil liberty are also crucial to our form of government and so easily taken for granted. Jesus was a teacher and instructed his followers to teach. So Christians developed schools and later monasteries, laying the groundwork for modern education. Christians founded 106 of the first 108 universities in the U.S. Ideas like tax-supported public schools, kindergarten, grade levels, secondary schools, modern colleges and universities, education for the deaf and the blind, literacy for the masses, and universal education that reaches beyond class, gender, and ethnicity all have one thing in common. They are all products of Christianity. It's hard to imagine life without the technological advances of modern science. Science, as we know it today, emerged hundreds of years ago during a period of unprecedented advances in mathematics, physics, astronomy, biology, and chemistry. The vast majority of these brilliant scientists, nearly every single one of them, were Christians. They believed that since the universe was created by a rational creator using rational rules, it ought to yield its secrets to rational creatures, using reason and observation. As a result, these early scientists searched for natural laws, confident that they existed, and they found them. Jesus' concern for all who suffered went above and beyond the social order of his day. In 252 AD, the Christians of Corinth saved the city from a plague, risking their lives to help those who had been dragged out into the street and abandoned to die. Christian compassion for the poor and the sick led to institutions for lepers, and later, monasteries dedicated to the care of the sick. These were the beginning of our modern hospitals. Christians were the driving force behind the creation of orphanages, care for the elderly, prison reform, labor reform, the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and the YMCA. And charitable giving was a uniquely Christian innovation, giving rise to countless contemporary philanthropic organizations. Our modern-day conceptions of human rights and equality derive exclusively from the biblical idea found in Genesis that all people are created in the image of God. Expanding on this affirmation of human equality, the Apostle Paul wrote, "Now there is neither Jew nor Gentile, slave or free, male and female, but all are one in Christ Jesus." But what about the dark stains in the history books? The Crusades, the Inquisition, and the Salem witch hunts. Christians clearly affirm that all people are flawed, so it's no surprise that Christianity's track record, like everyone else's, is less than perfect. But notice, those who committed these acts were acting in direct contradiction to the teaching and life of Jesus. So clearly, the blame cannot be placed on Jesus, but on those whose actions oppose his teachings and way of life. So much of what is good in our lives came about because 2,000 years ago, Jesus of Nazareth turned the world upside down. The historical record is unmistakably clear. No other cultural influence, no other social movement, no other teaching, philosophy, or religion has done more to promote the well-being of more people than Christianity.
Thank you for your attention. If you remember last class, Frankie sir, also talked about, the Hong Kong background is very unique. We are all, most of us are Hong Kong people, right? And then, the way that he talked about last time, we have so many NGOs in Hong Kong, right? Non-governmental organizations, like just now in this video also mentioned, like the YMCA, like the Salvation Army, 救世軍啊, YMCA, and all those were brought by the missionary, the 宣教士, in the 18th century. So today I shall be talking a little bit date back because, this course was designed to tell us, actually, we were talking about service, 我哋講服侍啊, we're talking about care to the elderly people for this course. And then we wonder, actually, why do we have to do that? People are born to be selfish, right? We all just concerned every day we wake up, we would concern about ourselves. You would talk about, what course we are going to take and what breakfast we're going to eat, So we were born like, we were concerned about ourselves. But then, in this course, we like to, share with us that actually why do we have to care for other people? Why? So I like to introduce in this course the ethos, that means the values and the virtue, the beliefs of Christianity. So actually, we are all in Baptist University, right? 我哋都係浸大嗰度讀吓。Any of you are Christians here? Any of you? Some, yes, but not many. Or have you been educated in a Christian primary school, secondary school, or Catholic? Catholic, yeah, some of your Catholic schools, you have probably read the Bible and you were taught, by, this in Hong Kong, there's so many Catholic schools, Christian schools, kindergarten, primary school. And then we wonder, why do we have to study all this stuff? Why, like the university now we are here was actually also were started by the Baptists and also by the missionary, and actually Hong Kong has very unique background. Hong Kong, I don't know whether you realize that, because Hong Kong was a colony, 即係一個殖民地，係嘛? So bit by bit, I will tell you guys a little bit more about the background of Hong Kong and why do we have so many NGOs in Hong Kong that Frankie Sir taught about last time, and we date back into the original history of that, So, well, have you ever thought about the meaning of life? Because I'm more like a philosophical person. I teach philosophy and I teach Christianity and I teach counseling. So, I don't know whether you have been using counseling service. 有冇人試過被輔導啊，或者 or psychology service? 有嘅都有, some of you, yeah. So actually, what is the purpose of life? I don't know whether you have thought about that. You're a young person, 18, 19 years old, right? 好後生啊，你哋啊. And then, but do you think, have you ever thought about, why am I here? Why am I in the world? Huh? You're smiling, huh? You're the only gentleman in the class. So many girls surrounding you. 得一個男同學啊，我哋有幾多個, yeah. So just now the video was talking about woman, So actually we are all so lucky now as women that we can be educated as a person, So what I'm trying to say is, what is the purpose of life? Have we ever thought about that? That whether, why are we here? So actually in Christian beliefs, it's, you can see the Bible verse here, that God actually made us. God made us. We were made in the image of God. That in the next slide, I would talk about that. Any of you here believe that there's God? 有冇人信宇宙有一個主宰啊? Or there's any kind of God, Christian God, you believe, right? Or Buddhist God, I don't know. Well, because there's a lot of different religion. There's a creator, in the world. Anybody believe there's a creator in the world? 有冇人信世界係做出嚟㗎? Yeah. Or you don't know? Yeah, some of you believe, right? Or some of you are atheists, 無神論者啊. But in Christian belief there's a God. Like just now in the video we talked about the world is lovely, right? The world is, well, of course, like the video said, that people can be very evil, and there's so many things I understand you guys that the difficulties in this era, because now we have the phone and we have the internet, we have so much information on internet, and every day in the news is very difficult for young. I mean, I often felt empathy for young people in your generation, because every day we turn on the television or we look at the cell phone, it's all bad news, right? Everything is so negative. And then because we have so much information, like for example, now the war in Ukraine, many people died. And when nowadays you guys have all the information in the world that is all negative. People being raped, being murdered. And like in America, people use guns and so many people die. I don't know how you guys feel about the world and yourself. How do you feel? How do you feel about people? You know, any of you like to say a few words about that? You know, what's the meaning of life? And, you know, I hope that this class will be like a discussion, you know, that we have a small class. The class is not so big. We have a small class. It's nice to have a bit of discussion, you know. Later on today, we shall have a discussion, group discussion. So it's nice, I think, is to be able to interact, you know, and not only me talking, it's so boring, right? I don't know, how do you feel about, you know, the world? Maybe you can think, if you don't want to speak out, you can think about that. I noticed that in Baptist University, the students, in Hong Kong, the students are trained to be very 乖乖, 好乖, and then we train to keep quiet, and we train to be very modest, you know, and not talk about things. But I don't know. I hope that after this class, we will be thinking more. What's the meaning of life? Why do we study? You know, why do we have to be good, to be kind to these elderly people? Because we were made, actually, God is good, you know, actually. But I think it's very hard in this era, in this world, it's very hard to like put this kind of thinking into our mind. Because I also, you know, when I was your age, I studied in the 科大 in UST, University of Science and Technology. When I was your age, I was a rebel, because I have a lot of problems with my parents, and I also always ask this question into God, you know, if God is so good, you know, if God is love, why he made us suffer? You know, I don't know whether are you suffering, you know, whenever you're studying in university, it's actually a suffering, I think. Isn't it? It's a torture, isn't it? Yeah. It's a torture. Yeah, it really is. I think about things like that every day. You know, why am I doing this? And why am I come to this classroom and talk? And, you know, apart from for the money, you know, apart from as a work, you know, you have to work. And what is the point of all this? What's the point? Yeah, I'm glad you express yourself. It's really life is hard, you know, maybe especially for young people in your age. I really have empathy for you guys, because it's, for me, you know, it was too much information nowadays. It's too much. Like you Google everything, you study, it's too much to study about. It's too much information, right? Then you don't know, you wonder, you know, why am I doing this? But why do we need all this? Why do we need all this? Why do we need to study? You don't know, right? So I really like to, you know, we can think about that. And I hope, you know, well, I don't think after this one class, we can answer all of these questions. But I like to ask why, you know, I like to ask, and I like to hear different opinion. And I'm not trying to convince you to be a Christian or something. I'm not trying to do that. But I really hope that throughout this semester, what I found is, I think it's a really like a life-changing a life-changing experience. I really hope that, Dr. Yu was the founder for this course. And whenever he designed this course, that we really hope that the students, that you are not just coming in to do things for the sake of doing it. And, you care for the elderly because you have to be kind. We just hope that, this class today we hope we find the origin of the meaning, of life, and why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? So that's why today I like to share with you, like I said, this university is Baptist University. It was built originally by the Baptist Hospital, and all these missions were originally from the Christians. So, and then and in Hong Kong, so many also last class, Frankie sir talked about a YMCA and all these missionaries work in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is a very unique place, actually. I want to, you guys to give some credit for yourself, because living in Hong Kong is very difficult. It's not easy. I don't know whether you noticed that or not. Being a Chinese, Hong Kong Chinese is, you feel that, right? You nod your head. Thank you so much. It's very hard being a Hong Kong Chinese because, nowadays you can see the political situation, right? The Western world and China, they are really have big conflict, right? In terms of philosophy, in terms of politics, political view, or like a political issues. But then Hong Kong is such a small place, but it's actually in the middle from the tension from the West and the East. It's actually. So, and then, what I want to always share with you that actually Hong Kong have a very unique position, as a Chinese person, whenever this semester, whenever you will be serving the elderly, and it's from the last two generations before you. So they also probably encounter a lot of the suffering before, in the Hong Kong history. So I like to share with you that, I hope that this course, this class, can be enlightening, can be changing. Like Dr. Yu have been teaching for how many years already for this course? Like 10 years or nearly 10 years. That's so many semesters already. Actually, for me, I already 5 years been teaching this course, more than like 7-8 semester already. So we have witnessed students really transform, after this course. So just now, one of the students said, sometimes we take this course, we don't know whether it's meaningful or not, whether it's useful or not. So I really hope, today what we're going to share with you is the original idea about this world, some part of it at least. So I this is a long introduction because I just feel I'm a very sensitive person. I don't like to, force ideas into your head. But I hope that it's not an easy class to teach, really, because we talk about Christianity. It's very hard because nowadays, especially in the Western world, young people a lot of us are anti-Christ. A lot of us are anti-Christians. Really, everybody is so angry to God. I have experienced also when I was young, I was very angry with God, because all this suffering we have in this world. But originally, God didn't intend us to be like that. God loved us, actually. So I'm starting eventually to find out God is good, actually. So I want to tell you that, God is love, actually his nature is the essence, God's essence, the essence of God is love. So just now you saw the video, thank you for watching that. So a lot of things were originally from God, and he intended the world to be good, and he made us, and he wants us to enjoy this very nice world, and he himself, actually, God is like just now in the video talking about the science, all these things or so many scientists were Christians. So they also investigate, research about the world. And the world is actually very rational. It's fair, everything, you see, I don't know whether have you got the time to spend a bit time to, in over the holidays, did you spend some time to look at the green outside? 有冇睇到啲綠色嘅樹葉啊? Do you like hiking? You guys like the nature? Or maybe I feel very sad that often I get the answer that university students, they only just look at the screen. They only look at the computer and look at their cell phone. And any of you in the past week have spent 5 or 10 minutes looking at the sky or looking at the tree outside? 有冇人？有啊，有冇啊？有。Oh, good. Half of the class have. Yeah, I really encourage you guys, if you have in the weekend, actually Hong Kong is a very lovely place. Hong Kong have a lot of mountains. I love hiking. I have 4 dogs. I always hike. Yes. And I noticed that, when you are near the nature, now the curtains is all closed, but actually I can see from the gap, the sun is shining and the leaves, outside the leaves is green, the water we drink, everything God provide for us, actually that he made this world, it was originally supposed to be good because God is good, but, then why it's like that? So I will show you another video. What happened? Why it becomes like that? How come it's not supposed to be? I show you another video.
Crazy story at the beginning of the Bible. We have Adam and Eve, and they're in the Garden of Eden.
And everything in this garden is great. It's exactly as it should be, except there's this one tree that they're told by God not to eat from because it's dangerous and it will kill them.
So that's it. Avoid this fruit tree and we're fine.
Right. It seems pretty simple. But in this garden, there's a snake, and it starts telling a different story. It says that if you eat of this tree, it's not going to kill you. In fact, it's going to make you become like God.
And Adam and Eve, they believe the snake and they eat the fruit.
And because of this, the goodness of the garden is tragically lost, and evil and death enters into God's good world.
Now, why is there a talking snake in the garden? I mean, this thing is a problem.
Yeah, it's very strange. And even more strange is the fact that the Bible doesn't say why or how this thing even got there. It just presents the snake as this creature who's in rebellion against God and that wants to get other people to doubt God's goodness and lead them on a path towards death. And so whatever this snake is, it's the source of evil that pervades our world and our lives, even still today.
But there is some hope, because right here in the story, God makes this really interesting promise to Adam and Eve.
That someone is going to come in the future, a son of Eve. And this guy's going to come and he's going to crush the serpent's head and destroy evil at its source. However, during this battle, the serpent is going to bite this guy's heel.
So it's like a mutual destruction.
Yeah, it's this very strange but beautiful promise. And it's just left hanging there until the next key moment in the story, when God singles out this guy named Abraham and says that through his family, goodness and blessing is going to be restored back to all of the nations of the world. And as we follow this family, we get to one of Abraham's great-grandsons, this guy named Judah. And he receives this promise that a king is going to come from his line and that the whole world's going to follow this king, and he's going to bring peace and harmony, and there'll be lots of food and wine and milk and vineyards, and it's going to be awesome.
The first king that we meet from the line of Judah is a guy named King David. And he's a hero. Maybe he is the snake crusher.
But it turns out that David is infected with the same evil as the rest of humanity. He never crushes the snake, just the opposite. However, God makes a promise to David that this king is going to eventually come from his line. But as you go on in the story, one by one, each generation of his sons, they're just total chumps. They give into the snake, they choose evil, they go after money and sex and power and following other gods.
Things get so bad that they run the nation of Israel right into the ground, and the big bad empire of Babylon just takes them out.
And so now there are no more kings to even fulfill this promise.
So it seems like the whole plan is lost.
But during these dark days, there's this crazy group of guys called prophets, and they just kept talking about this coming king and reminding us of the promise that he'll come, he'll defeat evil, he'll restore the garden. Now, one specific prophet, Isaiah, he tells us more about why this king is bitten. Isaiah says that the promised king receives this wound because of humanity's evil, and that it kills him. But then all of a sudden he comes back, and Isaiah says it's because he suffered this wound that he can now become a source of healing to other people.
But the Old Testament ends, and the snake-crushing king that everyone's been talking about never shows up.
And this is why, when the New Testament begins, it introduces us to Jesus of Nazareth, not as some random guy, but as someone who comes to fulfill these specific ancient promises.
Yeah, we learn that he's from the line of David, Judah, and Abraham.
And he goes around Israel announcing that the goodness of God's kingdom is here now. And he begins confronting the effects of evil on people by healing them, by forgiving them of their sins and evil.
Many people are now believing that this is, in fact, the promised king.
But Jesus began telling his closest followers that he was going to become king and bring peace by taking the full effect of humanity's evil into himself.
The fatal snake bite wound.
Exactly. And so it seems like the serpent wins. And this story actually would be a tragedy except for what happens next. Jesus rises from the dead.
And now Jesus has the power over evil and death for himself.
And so the rest of the New Testament is then making this claim that Jesus' power over evil and death has now become available to us to begin confronting the effects of evil in our lives.
But even still, death and evil are a real problem in our world all around us.
And so the story of the Bible ends by describing this future day when Jesus comes back and he finishes the job. He destroys the snake once and for all, and he restores the goodness of the garden here on earth.
So thank you for your attention. Yeah, it's quite complicated, this story. It's not easy to explain, right? But I want to say this amazing that, Christianity has a long history, that actually the Bible was written by so many different prophets, but then actually they were all in the same one theme. Even the Old Testament and the New Testament were all under the same one theme. Is that, about the original, I study a lot of different religion. So, and Christianity is a very special religion that actually explains, it's the only religion that explains the original of the world and the ends of the world. Just now we were talking about, why we are here, why are we studying, why are we here, what's the meaning of life, Actually, I'd like to share with you that in the Bible, in Genesis, it says, God made us, God made us in his image. So we are human is the only creature in the world that we were made in God's image. So we inherited God's image. But then it's very nice that, from the video, it says that, Adam and Eve, a lot of people, you study in Catholic school, some of you before, everybody say that, why Adam and Eve so stupid, right? Why they eat the fruit and then they sin, But then actually this have a very symbolic, great meaning that actually I would like to share with you. What's the meaning behind this? God created us, all of us. I want to ask you, to very big extent, we all have free wills. Human beings have free wills. You can choose this course. You can choose to drop it, right? We still have eye withdrawal, right? You can still drop it. And you can choose to be good to the elderly. And you can choose to do the homework. And you can choose to leave. You can choose to quit university if you want. But to a certain extent, some of the philosophers argue that our free will is conditioned and conditional or not. But it's a very deep question. But at least, to a certain extent, we do have free wills, right? We can make a choice. We are very lucky in Hong Kong. Nowadays, our freedom is we still have, right? To a big extent we have, but of course, in a lot of countries, the freedom is, limited. But what I wanted to say is that in the video just now, it also explained that there's a price to pay, for people having the freedom. Like just now you saw in the video, a lot of the kings, even they were so close to God, even God chose the Israelites, 以色列人, that God tell it's the story from their nation. But then a lot of them actually chose to do wrong. They chose to not, even they understand God, that they have the Old Testament Bible, but then a lot of us choose not to be away from God. Well, we are doing this every day. Actually, this kind of sin, actually, what is the meaning of sin? Sin is to be away from God. Sin is not just like being guilty of doing a crime. It's not like that. The sin, it means we choose to be away from God. So actually, we all have this choice. We are very blessed that God gave us this choice. You can choose to like Him. You can choose to be God's children. And you can choose not to. You can choose to do your own ways, like Adam and Eve. You can choose to eat the fruit. And you can choose to not listen. And you do, right? I mean, even your parents give you a lot of, sometimes it's very hard for us to compare God with our parents, because our parents is also only human being. So what I want to say is, but then there's a price to pay that nowadays, like I said in the beginning of the class, the world is in such a chaos now that, it's nearly the end of the world, really, that you can see that there's plague, 有啲即係我哋有瘟疫啦，係咪？ We just gone through it 3 years, of plague in Hong Kong already. Actually, there were plagues, so many plagues already in the history of 啲黑死病啊，頭先講嗰啲 lepers 啊，嗰啲so many sickness, so many problems. 民要攻打民，國要攻打國啊。So many wars, already in the world. And why is that? Why is that suffering? Just now we were talking about that. It was because actually they were all the consequences of the collective free will of people. 即係我哋每人都有自由意志嘛，係咪? If, for example, if one person choose to do wrong, and then, for example, like, maybe I share with you a personal story. Like, for example, my mother and father divorced, when I was 11, 12 years old. And my mother left the family for her boyfriend. She didn't stay in the family. And then we started to suffer so much in my family. So it's like all this kind of thing. Well, people have free will. Nowadays, we can choose to have children before we get married. We can choose to have abortion. We can choose to, divorce. There's a lot of things we can do because it's a free world, right? But then what I want to say is actually, but who is going to, in the video, it says, who is going to set this right? It's God Himself. That is what I want to say is actually the consequence that's a price to pay that God made us. And we can have this free will. Nowadays, we can have this free will, and you can see that the world is in chaotic. But then, God promised in the Bible that at the end of the world, Jesus will set it right. And actually, in the Bible, Jesus is God Himself. He came to 2,000 years ago. You see, this year is 2023, like 2023年. So actually, all this, the calendar, everything is just reflect the history. It's also, our own calendar. It's also, from Christianity. 你哋知道嘅嗬，即係我哋個日曆吓。Like the 0 year was when Jesus was born, right? So 2023年吓，now we're using the calendar. It was because that Jesus was born 2,023 years ago. Then He actually came and died for us. So what I want to say is, why are we being good, in the Bible? Why we teach, why the Christians, they insist to be good. This in the Bible is talking about forgiveness. It's talking about reconciliation. 復和啊，和好啊. Well, now I want to share with you, after I become a Christian, I'm also reconcile. 我都同我媽咪復和咗啊，and with my father, because I became a Christian. And we also, we feel the love of God. So in the Bible, this is the teaching. It's actually, we were originally actually with God, but then we sin and we have our own choice. And then we come back. This is what God wanting us to do, is to come back and to reconcile with Him, say reconcile with Him, 同佢復和啊。So this is what the Bible has been teaching us. And why are we doing the service? Why this medical service and the care service in Hong Kong? It's actually the concept is about healing. Charity and healing is actually from the Bible, that we hope that this healing is not only physical healing, but also mental healing and spiritual healing. And it's also in relationship also, 身心社靈啊，身心社靈啊。So God intended, because we got away from Him, He was the source of life. Okay, but we also, it's like we are a light bulb. 好似我哋係一個電飯煲嚇，或者係一個燈膽啊。But whenever you are away from God, we are away from God, that we can become so broken. Even if you are the nicest computer, or even if you got a cell phone, it's the very latest version, but you do not charge the battery for the cell phone, it's no use, right? So this is what the Bible has been telling us, that we have to get back to God. And then we physically, mentally, spiritually, and in relationship, also 身心社靈, we will be healed. We will be reconciled with God and other people. So this is what the Bible has been saying. That's why Jesus in the gospel, 喺福音吓, there's so many of the miracle He performed to make people well again. So this is to 係預表吓，即係話He want to show us that in the end of the day, that people will be healed again. But okay. So it's not easy to understand, but the word charity, like just now in the video, it says Christians are the first people who always, nowadays in the plague, right? 我哋都係喺嗰個疫情裏邊啊。There were so many plagues. Just now in the video also say, and in the very beginning of the church, there were so many people were sick. And then, Christians were the ones who opened the hospitals, and then all promoting, the people from the church were usually, whenever there's plague in this one place, people usually go away, right? 即係你有瘟疫嘅地方啊，啲人都會走啊，會離開係嘛？ People will leave the place, but the church are the people. That's why Jesus' followers were so attractive, and the Christianity was spreading, because even after Jesus died, His disciples were keeping the promise of God and then trying to spread the gospel and try to, be good to each other, So Jesus said, you have to love Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your mind. And this is the first and greatest commandment. And the second commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. 要盡心盡性盡意愛你嘅神係第一條最大嘅誡命啦。And then the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. That means you love God and you love your neighbor, 即係愛你嘅鄰舍啊。And you love yourself also, because you have to love the neighbor as yourself, right? So you love God, and then you can love yourself, and then you can love the neighbor, the people surrounding you. So this is the ethos that what we are going to teach in this course. We hope that we can learn to love yourself. At least if you do not know God, at least you can start to learn to love yourself and love your neighbor. So this is what we are going to promote in this course. Okay, so I would like to share with you very quickly, like I said just now, there's so many plagues in the world, like 即係好多次㗎啦。其實 now we have gone through the pandemic， 即係世界上嗰啲瘟疫啊，至少都有 好大嘅 so many big plagues in the world. Nowadays in Hong Kong, I mean in the world, a few years already. But then, the church, you can see this historical picture. The church were the ones who started all the hospitals, 即係所有醫院呢個體制were started institutionalized by the church. And you can see, okay, well, Hong Kong system were original from the UK, right? So you can see that the oldest charity in UK were in the 11th century. So, well, Christianity was in the Middle East, and then it was all spread to the Europe, and then, in all these different countries. And you can say that, in Black Death 有黑死病啦，喺個歷史裏邊13幾年啦， and even half of the Europe were killed， 即係勁過而家呢個好多half of the Europe were dead, were killed. But then, it was the church who stayed behind and to build the hospitals. And also, in the history, actually the European, nowadays, it's very hard to imagine. Why we have to study history is to really look at the real history, because the history always repeat itself, right? Now it's very hard for you to imagine, because now the Western country is like very advanced, right? And then they have all this technology. And now in Hong Kong also, we have the best hospital also. But then can you imagine, actually in the 11th century, in the 13th century, also in Europe were also very chaotic and also such a big mess. And then the church and work with the government, and then they built the institutions like the orphanage, 即係嗰啲孤兒院and for the sick and elderly, for the 老人院for the elderly, and for the sick people, and all this hospital were built by the church. Well, just now in the video, of course, it says there's a lot of dark history about the church also. 即係你有權就會有啲好黑暗嘅嘢，係咪？ Of course, it's going to be corruption and everything. But originally, it was good. Originally, it was built by the church, all this medical system, all these resources. And then the government was starting to work with the church. Okay. And then it's more nearing to us. Just now we were saying that YMCA and YWCA, they were helping in Hong Kong still today. And then originally at YMCA and all this Salvation Army, they were started in UK and US also, and in the 18th century, 17th century. And then because why they start to build organizations? Because of industrialization, 現代化. Like a lot of the people, well, they used to be farming in the hometown, and then after that they starting to come into the city, and they work for the factory, during the wartime. And after the wartime, the society was starting to be developed. So then a lot of the young people, like yourself, I want to ask you, after work, if you don't have to study, after work, what do you usually want to do? But can you imagine, like in the old days, in the maybe 17th century, like there's not many, well, nowadays we have NGOs, right? Where we have very a lot of healthy activities, like the cinema, like you can play badminton, like that. But in the old days, well, you go work in a factory. Can you imagine? You work in a factory, and then after that, after you get off work, there's nothing to do, right? The old young man, young woman, what do you think that they would usually do in the old days? What people would usually do? Gambling. Yeah, gambling. And then they drink alcohol. Like, they say for men or for women also, 嫖賭飲蕩, these few things, that they do, because there's no entertainment, there's nothing. You go to work every day, and then, well, after the lights is out, it's dark, and then you go to bar and pubs. Maybe in university life, you guys still do that. Some of you still do that, right? We go to bars and pubs. So that's why some Christians, these people, that they started this organization. So it was the original of NGO, the original of NGO that they started, well, nowadays you can imagine we take a lot of things for granted. Like nowadays, young people, you probably don't want to go to 社區中心. You won't want to go to this NGO to be entertained, right? Because you have so much entertainment. You have your cell phone, and you have Netflix, and you have Disney Plus, and you have all these things. But in the old days, they didn't have. So some of the very good Christians, they started Bible study classes. They built, like in Hong Kong, we still have an YMCA. There's a big building in Tsim Sha Tsui and one in Yau Ma Tei. They have all these very cheap courses. Like, you can learn different language, you can learn cooking, you can learn swimming, like that. So at that time, they also have this organization from the church that they teach people. Well, at that time, a lot of people were not so educated. They didn't know better, So it was the start of the charity organizations in Europe. Okay. So, and then starting, in China, well, there's a list. You can see there's a list starting from the 18th century. The Protestant missionary or Catholic missionaries, so many of them starting to come. They want to bring the good news. Just now I said about, it's already foretold. The Bible 已經講咗the good news is spread around the whole world. So actually, like, because people believe in God, and then they want to share this good news with the rest of the world, like, so that you can see that there were thousands and thousands of people. Can you imagine, like, you are educated, right? If you were these missionaries, 如果你係呢啲宣教士啊, they are probably like you. So many of them, there's so many stories about them, that they were educated, but they can see that in the rest of the world, there are so many people not as lucky as they are. Any of you have 有冇試過做短宣啊嗰啲啊? Have you visited other countries? Like there's still some third world countries in the world, right? Have you ever done some voluntary work? 有冇試過去泰北啊? 去菲律賓啊, or Africa, doing voluntary work. Have you done that? 有冇人試過? 冇啊,冇. So can you imagine? You are educated, you are lucky, you have got you got the education you need for your future. But then these Christian people, they started to think about for other people. What in the rest of the world, there are so many people, they haven't heard the good news. They haven't been educated and so-called civilized as they were. So they actually went out abroad, they actually sail across the sea. Thousands and thousands of them. You see, these are all the organizations of the missionaries. They came to China. Can you imagine that? Of course, at that time, there was a lot of people want to trade with China, right? So these missionaries, usually, they would abroad to the ship of these traders, 即係嗰啲做生意嗰啲船啊, these missionaries, they would go along with all these people, they do business with China, and then they came to China. They try to, you see these pictures here. There's actually thousands of them. Then they benefit the China and educate and build church, build hospital, So I give you some example. Like, for example, this one is the first guy, Morrison. This guy. Maybe I show you this video before I speak. So, so I will share with you the video about the missionary, Mr. Morrison. And so maybe could you do some translation for her also? Yeah, here you are.
黃家俊啊，灣仔嘅摩利神山啦，大家都聽過啦。原來紀念一位傳教士喎。
冇錯，就係第一個啦嚟中國傳教嘅基督教傳教士馬禮信啦。由伍俊介紹下。
馬禮信係倫敦傳道會嘅牧師，喺200年前嘅9月4號經澳門進入中國， 又到過廣州同埋香港傳教。佢努力學習中文，花咗10幾年時間，先又將新約同埋舊約譯成中文版嘅神天聖書。1823年喺馬六甲出版，係第一部完整嘅聖經中譯本，仲保存住嘅其中5本喺香港展出。
對後來呢嚟到中國嘅傳教士呢，學習中文呢好有幫助，有好多傳教士繼續嚟呢向宣教。咁呢佢對呢係個陌生嘅中國，一個未知嘅中國呢，對當時呢係西方嘅國家呢係開始咗有一個更大嘅認識，所以呢個係佢開始咗一步。
出版聖經同埋編輯漢英字典之餘，馬禮遜亦都積極辦學。坐落深水埗英華街嘅英華書院就係由馬禮遜喺馬六甲創立。1843年搬到嚟香港，2003年搬到而家呢一度。位於灣仔嘅摩利神山亦都係紀念馬禮遜而命名。為咗紀念馬禮遜來華200週年，香港聖經公會大會堂低座舉辦名為《聖道東來》嘅展覽。今次展覽除咗展出神天聖書之外，都有展板介紹馬禮遜同埋其他西方傳教士嚟中國傳教嘅歷史。無線電視記者吳景俊報道。
No, can you imagine, like I said, that if you were educated, then you can think about some people who has not the same opportunity to be educated or to have the good news, to have the love of God. Then would you consider, to go to, for example, Philippines, or would you consider to go to some places, the third world country or Africa? Nowadays, whenever the gospel were passed to Hong Kong, nowadays, actually, in my church, also we have we support missionary to send pastor to go to other countries nowadays, to like in Japan, or Thailand, north of Thailand, or some places nowadays, because Hong Kong is more developed. But then can you imagine, if you receive, the love of God, and you receive education, and you are civilized yourself, would you think 你會唔會咁做啊? Would you think, or even short term, 你會唔會 would you go to Africa, or would you go to Thailand, some village? Actually, there are a lot of Hong Kong people nowadays doing that from the church. They do, even for short period of time. A lot of people do that. But can you imagine if you are 18 years old, 19 years old, like young? Actually, there's many stories of all these missionaries. Well, I would like to tell you this story. Actually, this guy, in 25 years, he came to China. He really loved Chinese people. It's not for the business. It's not for the money, Of course, at that time, there were a lot of Westerners. They came for the business. They came for the money. But actually, he was not. He bring his wife to China, to Guangdong, Canton. And actually, his wife, you can see, if you go to Macau, and nowadays we can go to Macau, right? If you go to Macau, there's this Catholic seminary, this cemetery, 即係嗰個叫做天主教墳場，澳門嘅天主教墳場啊。If you go to that one, you can still see the tomb. There's still these 3 tombs. One is himself. So actually, he died, and when he was only 52, he died in Macau. And then his wife also, actually, his wife, when he was pregnant, when she was pregnant, the son also, the first son also died in Macau, or 夭折啊。Can you imagine? Because whenever they came to China, they came to Macau, they were not used to 即係唔習慣嗰啲細菌啊。They didn't have the immune system. Nowadays we take it for granted that we can travel to America, we can take the flight, we can travel to Thailand, or we can travel to a lot of places, Africa. Even if you're going to travel to Africa, you're going to have a lot of injection. You need to do the injection before you travel to Africa. So, but then at that time, the people, these white people, they came to China, they didn't have the immune system. Some of them even die on the ship. 即係要坐幾個月船啊。Some of them even die in the boat, or when they first arrive, they die already. So actually it's a great risk. It's not like now 我哋就係而家去搭個飛機好似好方便啊。Now it's very easy for us to take the flight to go to different country. But at that time, they need to sail the boat like 3 months, 4 months, 就坐幾個月船先至嚟到中國㗎。 So can you imagine why they do that? Why they would do that to preach the good news, to bring the Bible. Nowadays we can read the Bible, right? We have Cantonese, we have Chinese Bible, we have different versions of Chinese Bible. But then at that time, he was the first guy who translate. He actually came to learn Chinese, and then he actually, he lost his son, and then he also 佢都係瘧疾死嘅. He also died with malaria, very young age, only 52 years old. So he during the time he only went back to UK once. In 25 years, he only went back to his hometown once, and he presented the Chinese Bible to the UK King George the Fourth at that time. So, but then at that time there was a lot of misunderstanding of 即係對啲西人啊，對西方人 a lot of misunderstanding, and then they mistaken the at that time it's actually it's very 好矛盾嘅. It's actually very split, because at that time the Westerner people, they came to China, and a lot of them is a lot of the war. A lot of them they wanted to get benefit from China and Hong Kong. We have this very complicated history. The way why Hong Kong was a colony for UK is because of this unfair treaty, 南京條約，你哋知道啦. The history啦. So at that time, a lot of people hated Western people. But can you imagine you go to somewhere to try to have a mission where they hate you? 即係如果有啲地方好憎中國人嘅, but you go there to preach. Can you imagine that? Because they thought that the Western people came to China to sell the opium and try to harm the Chinese people, try to take advantage. A lot of the Westerners were like that. 即係都有啲人呢，即係有啲人呢係 some of them were good people. They're the missionary people. They want to preach, and some were not good. They wanted to take over China. 八國聯軍你哋聽過啦，係咪? So it was a very mixed, that a lot of people misunderstood. And have you ever heard of the history about 義和團之亂? Then at that time, because so many of the Chinese people, they hated the Westerner, and then there was war. 其實啲打仗係好多㗎. And then actually they have, well, then when they see 即係見到啲白人啊, when they saw the white people, they wouldn't know whether you are missionary or whether you are the soldiers, right? They just kill you anyway. So at that time, it was more than thousands of missionaries actually were killed in the wartime. But they still help Chinese people. 即係佢哋係嚟到係幫中國人，但係佢哋都俾人爭啊，俾人殺啊。So it was this war, 即係義和團之亂咧，死咗幾千, there's a few thousands of missionaries, including their children, died. So can you imagine, why they still come, why they still come to China, is to spread the good news, of God. They spread the gospel, Okay. So, and then, we're talking about the history of Hong Kong. In the, the colonial time, actually, in the beginning, in the UK, the government, the UK government, they wanted to come to Hong Kong to take the advantage of, having the trade, having the trade, like they want to trade with China. So Hong Kong was a very nice port, 係一個好嘅港口嚇. They can trade with China. So, but then at the time, nowadays, actually, in the beginning, the UK government did not want to develop Hong Kong. 即係佢哋唔係嚟想嗰個政府唔係嚟想幫我哋興建香港㗎嚇. In the beginning, because so that's why they only have Hong Kong was a very, very remote, only a fishing village. 即係香港係好. It was like a very not civilized place, Hong Kong. And then during that time, in the early time, there was a lot of problems. 有啲瘧疾啊，又有啲鼠疫啊。This picture, you can see this picture on the left is these people get sick. And then in the central, if you've been to Lan Kwai Fong, in the central, this is, the stairs, this is like 太平山, 清洗太平地. Like they go up uphill at that place. Actually, there was because people starting to be crowded, starting to live together. And then in Hong Kong at that time, so many people were sick. And then actually in Hong Kong at that time, there was no medical system, no hospitals. And then can you imagine now if you're sick, you can go to a Baptist hospital, you can go to public hospital. So many hospitals in Hong Kong nowadays. It's only like 即係百幾年歷史嘅咋 only 即係 can you imagine the development of Hong Kong is only like only like 200 years, only more than 150 years. But then you know, like just now I told you in the Europe, they will have few thousand years of history. But in Hong Kong, it was developed up to the international standard. We always say that, oh, Hong Kong is an international city. You know, like, 好似 Paris, you know, it's as good as London, as good as Tokyo, you know. But then actually Hong Kong is only have very short history. Only like 200 years, 150 years history, you know, that means it's like the people here, like ourselves. So what I wanted to say is we should appreciate ourselves because we only have like three generations. Maybe your parents also are not university students, right? University graduates. 你哋爸爸有冇讀咗大學畢業㗎？有冇一啲都有啲都有嘅係嘛？ Some of you have. Or maybe your grandmother were not educated also, right? So like only very short period of time, the civilization in Hong Kong. So what I want to say is at that time, the British government, they only wanted to come to Hong Kong to take the money from China, to benefit from the trade. They wouldn't have bring money to Hong Kong to develop Hong Kong. So it was actually the church and the missionaries, they collect a lot of money from their original country. They raise money from the church. Well, it's easy to imagine, like nowadays, Hong Kong do a lot of charity ourselves. Like if you hear flood in Thailand, if you hear some war in Ukraine or whatever places, Hong Kong people are very much willing to donate money. Can you know that, right? There's a flood in China or flood in Thailand. Hong Kong people are very generous because we have been benefit from other people helping us. You know, maybe we didn't know that. Actually, Hong Kong people, they do a lot of charities. There's a lot of charity organizations in Hong Kong. And whenever other country, because Hong Kong is kind of rich also, so many Hong Kong people willing to donate money. The rich people, because they were benefit from they were also poor when they were like, you know, those richest people in Hong Kong, right? They were also poor when they were younger. So they're always willing to donate a lot of money to the charities, right? So at that time, so they get the missionary, the church, they gather the money to develop the medical system, the healthcare system, the service, the public service, you know, for this for all this a lot of the homeless children, 嗰啲孤兒院啊 old people old folks home and 麻風病院people, the hospital and the organization for the blind people. So they built from scratch. 即係由冇變到有 So only in like 150 years that the church helped to build, you know. You see, like for example, you see these first hospitals. Also 都係摩利神山嘅之前only in the 18th century, only in the beginning of the 19th century, also is built, you know, this 拿打素你聽過啦，拿打素Nether Soul Clinic was the first hospital were built by this London Missionary Society. And at that time in Hong Kong, can you imagine? Only in Hong Kong, there was only 萬幾人嘅咋. The population in Hong Kong was only entire population in Hong Kong. Only 而家幾多人啊？香港幾多萬啊？How many people in Hong Kong nowadays? 700幾啦，係咪 ？So many people migrated. 以前800幾萬啦，800幾萬，而家700幾萬。So many people left Hong Kong already. But then, can you imagine 以前係萬幾人嘅啫。Can you imagine, right? And then, but half of the people were the patients of this first hospital. 喺香港島嗰邊So they built the first hospitals in Hong Kong, right? Okay. And then, this I can share with you this other beautiful story. I'm aware of the time. Okay, I show you another video.
做乜嘢去？小姐，你做咩事啊？暈咗喎！
佢咩事啊？咩事啊？
我已經打咗電話啦，救護車仲未嚟啊！佢暈低咗啊！
喂，急症室啊！嗱，打數同事啊，上醫院條斜路咧有個路人暈低咗，call 救護車大作仲未到，麻煩即刻出嚟揾人幫手啊嘛！唔該晒。咩事啊？
醫生佢暈咗啊！
係，我哋行下啲啊，等我嚟啊，小姐。我哋除咗嘢先。點啊？而家擘大眼睇睇。
喂，點啊？佢咩事啊？
哦，佢突然間暈低咗，我哋而家幫緊佢。
好。我喺急症室工作差唔多20年，真係分秒必爭。醫護人員首要嘅任務就係救命，但係今日我換咗個角色，做咗呢度嘅院長，見到經敏為懷呢4個字，令我再深思全人醫治嘅真正意義。1997年，那打素醫院開始服務新界東嘅居民，擁有先進嘅設備。好多人都唔知道呢間年輕嘅醫院其實背後已經有130年嘅歷史，係香港第一間為華人服務嘅西醫醫院。呢度每件展品都有一段歷史故事。1887年嘅香港社會醫療上有好大嘅需求，於是當時陸續興建咗3間醫院，就係雅麗氏利濟醫院、那打素醫院同埋何妙齡醫院。後嚟喺1954年，3間醫院合併，命名為雅麗氏何妙齡那打素醫院。原來香港大學醫學院嘅前身，即係香港西醫書院嘅教學醫院，就係早期嘅雅麗氏利濟醫院。2011年，我哋正式成為香港中文大學醫學院附屬耳鼻喉科學屬單位，進一步提升耳鼻喉科服務，培訓人才同埋推動學術研究。其實那打素醫院喺開院嘅早期，首先引進咗西方療法，同時亦成為實習醫院。那打素醫院亦有好多首創嘅項目，一直影響今日嘅醫療服務。
昔日嘅那打素護士學校，其實為今日中文大學那打素護理學院奠下咗良好嘅基礎。那打素經敏為懷嘅精神，同埋全人護理嘅概念，成為我哋培育新一代護理專才嘅重要元素。當中大家最欣賞就係我哋學生喺照顧病人嘅時候嗰種嘅態度，同埋佢哋嘅同理心。學生種種嘅表現，其實係充分演繹咗那打素嘅經敏為懷嘅精神。
What I want to say is, maybe we take it for granted. Nowadays, if you get sick, we can have hospitals to go to, and immediately, if you dial 999, the ambulance, if somebody if now I fall down, if you die 999, maybe in 5 minutes or 6 minutes, the ambulance will come to help me. But can you imagine if you live in like 200 years before Hong Kong, if you have sickness, if you are ill, if you have baby, there was no medical system in Hong Kong actually, and they was built from scratch. Like you saw in the video, we often take it for granted. Or of course, we often still say, there's not enough resources. So many, over the pandemic, so many elderly people need to wait long time in the hospital. It's true, we understand, because Hong Kong nowadays is so populated, so crowded with so many people in such a small place, But then, but we have to also acknowledge that, over the years, the development of medical system in Hong Kong were from scratch. We had nothing, actually 200 years ago, we had nothing. Like nowadays, if you look outside in the Peace Baptist University in Lok Fu, there's nothing. There's nothing in here, it was a forest. It was a rainforest, there was tiger. Why Lok Fu is called Lok Fu? Is used to be called 老虎岩. Actually, Lok Fu 係叫老虎岩. Actually, they used to have tiger here, It was it was a rainforest in Hong Kong, so like, can you imagine now everything is so advanced, everything is, if you go to a hospital, now we have a private hospital, we have public hospitals. So it was from scratch. So I'd like to tell you this beautiful love story. This one, actually, this guy, Ho Kai, Mr. Ho, he also a Christian, and he studied in UK. He has a law degree and he was a doctor also. So in the 1887, he actually built this hospital. And why he built this hospital? Because it was based on a beautiful love story. This lady in the left is his wife. He got to know him in UK when he studied, and they fell in love and they got married. And this lady, Alice, she followed him to come to Hong Kong. And they were happy and everything. But then after only 2 years or so, they got married after short time. And because she came to Hong Kong and she fell ill, she has this viral fever, and she died. Very unfortunate. She was a beautiful lady. But then this guy, he was very sad. And then he was a rich guy and he was a Christian. And then he built hospital, this Alice 利濟醫院, Alice Memorial Hospital, in remembrance of his wife. And this one is her sister. So she also, because like I said, they are also Christian. There was this, they were educated in UK, so they got to know the Bible, they got to know Christ. And then they were more well-off people. And then she also built another hospital, 何妙齡醫院, this lady. And then she also built another hospital for giving birth, 係產科醫院. So, and then like I just now in the video, it says, after a while, these few hospitals merge together and become the 雅麗何妙齡那打素醫院. It's actually the same hospital. It became, and then after that, it was in the Hong Kong side. But then after that, the government starting to work together with these Christian missionary hospitals, and then they starting to take over. The Hong Kong government is starting to get more advanced, and then so all these hospitals and all these organizations, they were not under the missionary anymore. When Hong Kong become more developed, and then the missionary will slowly fade out, So, and then you can see this, they changed the name, 叫做有德那打素醫院, and then nowadays it's in Tai Po, Now, if you go to Tai Po, 有冇人住大埔嗰頭啊? If you go to this hospital, just now they showed the museum, right? The guy showed the museum, this 大埔那打素醫院吓. So you can see the museum and talk about the history. So and then, like I said just now, X-ray were imported. Hong Kong was the first Asian country having X-ray, and then they train a lot of nurses. Nowadays we have university training nurses, right, and doctors, but then it was from scratch. Okay, so you can see all these old pictures, like 那打素醫院 in the old days, and 何妙齡醫院 阿麗士醫院, and then they were merged together, and then they become the Hong Kong side 那打素醫院, and then they become the one in the Tai Po. All this picture you can see. Okay, so and then also in Hong Kong University, and they also have the first college for training doctors in Hong Kong, and then nowadays it become Hong Kong University, 即係香港大學嘅前身啊. Hong Kong University before it was this medical university, and then 孫中山先生 also study here. 我哋國父係咪? Sun Yat-sen, he also was graduated in this Hong Kong university, and then nowadays it changed the name to 李嘉誠大學. Okay, 即係醫學院 because he donated the money. Okay, so can you imagine? I just want to say that all the system were from scratch, and nowadays we have the medical record, right? Now if you use 嗰個咩醫健通 if you install the app, if you see the doctor in the public hospital, you can transfer your medical record, for your private doctor to be able to see. Okay, so nowadays everything is digitalized, right? But can you imagine, at that time before, I don't know whether when you were young, whether you have been 即係細個嘅時候有冇去過啲 clinic 啊? If you've been to some local clinics, when I was young, they only just write your medical record on a card, right? In a card, and then they put in 即係喺個櫃嗰度咧就攞你個病歷 they take out your record from the cabinet when you were young, right? So now everything is digitalized, So can you imagine, all these things were just built in a very short period of time. And then also so many charities. Okay, later we shall have a discussion. I would like you guys to do a bit of research about different hospitals and different charity organizations in Hong Kong, and look at about the efforts, the vision and mission, 嗰啲使命啊, the mission and vision. Later we shall be doing this discussion. So I like to say that 盲人院啦 in Hong Kong, and then 兒童院啦, like the orphanage is still operating now. 聖基道兒童院啦, 播道兒童院啦, they are still operating now, and they were also started by missionary for these blind people, for the orphans. Like I said just now, the YMCA, YWCA, all these organizations were started, by the missionary. Okay, so you can research about that later for the discussion. And also, I like to say just now in the first video I show you, also woman. Now we have so many ladies student here. We are so blessed and lucky. I can teach standing here as a lady teacher. I can teach, but only a few decades, 幾十年前 because women was still not treated very well in China and in Hong Kong. And then, like I said, just now in the video also shown, 係嗰個紮腳咧, in the Qing dynasty, the woman need to bind their foot, right? Just now you saw the video. And it was also from the missionary people, they started to go against the government. They start to, from the church, they voice out to say that we should be fair to the ladies, and we should protect the woman. We should go against this kind of horrible policy about, this old-fashioned kind of thinking. So it was the American missionary ladies. They start to stop this kind of policy for the ladies. And then also, can you imagine, in the old days, nowadays we have Filipino helper, right? 而家有啲外國嚟嘅傭工 we have Indonesian helper to help the people to work It's actually also not so fair treatment for them still, and they have low salary, and then they also live in not very good places. Sometimes I also rethink for them. They also have limited freedom. We also have to really should advocate for them. But in the old days, actually, in Hong Kong, 即係1920幾年啦, it's actually only 100 years ago. The girls in Hong Kong, 即係仲係可以 legally, you can sell and buy girls in Hong Kong. 即係畜婢啊，你好似即係當人係畜生咁啊 You know, you like you can sell and buy woman as your wife or as your maid or as the wife for your son, like that. So you can see these pictures. These young girls, they were bought and sell or sold, you know, as some of them even for like prostitution, like, you know. So that's actually, we are so blessed as girls nowadays. Only 100 years ago, 即係100年前，唔係好耐㗎咋吓。In Hong Kong, there's still so many, you know, like you can see the old film, 啲馬姐啊吓，and you know they have 啲妹仔啊。So it was also the church who start to speak against, because at that time it was sort of rich family. They also have 妹仔啊。If you search in the history on the internet, there's so many stories about that. And then it was the church who start to, the anti 妹仔 society 啊，反對畜婢會。They start to, you know, go against this kind of unfair policy for women, for protecting the children and the woman, you know. Okay. And then, and then also a bit of history also, like I said, you know, in Shek Kip Mei, Kowloon Tong, Shek Kip Mei, in the 50s, in the 40s, 即係都係幾十年前㗎咋。Actually, a lot of people, you know, they migrate from China to escape from the war. So they came to Hong Kong, 即係好多人走難啦。即係 after the Second World War, First World War, they came to Hong Kong and they built house just in the mountains. 係咁喺石硤尾嗰度起啲屋。And there was at that time, there was so many fires. 有啲幾萬個屋咧燒咗啊！Like so many houses were burned down. Can you imagine? It was just this area. 石硤尾好近㗎，係咪？ And then at that time, I saw some of these documents saying that at that time in Sham Shui Po, so many people, they live in the street. So, and then all these Salvation Army, all these organizations, all is like charity organizations or Christian charity organizations, like Salvation Army, 即係救世軍啊，派飯啊。They also collect a lot of money from UK or from other country, and then they help these people to build houses, 即係衛理園啊，衛理道。They also even build houses for all these homeless people, and they 派飯啊，派奶粉啊。You know, for these people, they give out milk and, you know, food, you know, for that. So this kind of charity organization is really help a lot of people in Asia. Yeah. And then in the 60s and 70s, also, you know, starting to, I especially show this picture, the lowest, 係67年嘅暴動啊，即係嗰時 like, you know, only a few years ago, we had the similar situation, right? But it's interesting that history always repeat itself. But at that time, it was the student, the young people were supporting the China government to go against the UK government. Because at that time, also in the 60s or 70s, actually at that time it was a lot of 即係好似而家一樣啦，即係貧富懸殊啦。A lot of the problem about the conflict with the rich people and so the young people, they didn't have enough jobs, they didn't have a lot of benefits. That's why they have riots. So and then starting from there 嘅麥理浩啦 ，at that time 嗰個港督啦嚇 ，at that time the governor starting to make more social policy. Maybe last class, Frankie sir also told you about. So the church and the government started in Hong Kong to work together to put in a lot of the more money. Like last class, you saw millions of dollars were put through the NGOs, right, to allow the benefits to young people, you know, so that's why the government starting to take over the NGOs. Okay. So now, and then in the 80s, it was the financial crisis, and then the starting, the government, the Chinese government, take over back to Hong Kong. So all the NGOs were going back to the government, and then all this lump sum grant, become not away from the missionary. So it's not the church running the NGOs no more. Of course, there are still a lot of Christians inside the NGOs, but all the fundings, because Hong Kong is starting to be more developed, so the fundings were not from the church no more, and was from the government. So now that's why maybe you can feel that why the NGO nowadays is not so Christian anymore, and it's all under the government's policy and under the lump sum grant. That this was why. And then there was a lot of Christian heroes also. Actually, in the pandemic, nowadays, maybe you don't feel so much, but in the SARS 嘅時候啊, and then a lot of the doctors and the nurse, a lot of them were Christians. They died. They were not scared of death. They died from the hospital, taking care of people with the plague. Yeah. And then also this other very good service I want to share with you also, that if you have friends, or if you have relatives or parents or your grandparents is hospitalized, actually 有啲院牧服務啊, you can use this service and ask this chaplaincy, 嗰啲院牧, to visit your family members. So this was developed and it was available in all the hospitals in Hong Kong, all the private and public hospitals in Hong Kong. So it's actually a very good professional service from the Christian. So you bear that in mind if you have somebody in hospitalized, or your grandparents, especially now in the pandemic, they really have a lot of function, because they cannot, they could not be visited by the family. So there's a lot of the people in the church, they work in the hospital to visit the people, sick people. Okay. And then nowadays, there are still 60% of the social service is Christian organizations, and a lot of the doctors, a lot of the nurses, a lot of the workers, the social workers are Christians. So it's actually, well, maybe you feel that it's all under the government, but still a lot of the people want to do the service. A lot of them are still Christian.